Hello, everyone. A few weeks ago, I ran a marathon and I was really sore for a few days afterward. The day after the marathon, it was actually difficult to walk around in clinic the next day. So just out of for my own curiosity, I wanted to look at some papers looking at the damage done to muscles after something like a marathon. Was one of there's a couple of papers I found, so I'll go over them very quickly. This one, they looked at 34 healthy volunteers, 7 female, 27 male, that finished the marathon in under 5 hours. So these are actual runners, uh, and they measured a bunch of their blood levels. So you can see their average time was about 4 hours here, which is considered a fairly decent time. And these people, their training status was they trained on average between 20 to 50 miles a week. So that is a good training volume. So these were not novice runners. They looked at these metrics before and after the marathon, and you see the biggest increases. There's some increase in urea and creatinine. This would be expected because of muscle breakdown. Creatinine kinase goes up. Uh, lactate dehydrogenase and AST go up. These are liver function markers. Myoglobulin goes up significantly. This is a muscle protein indicating muscle breakdown. And then white blood cell count and platelet counts go up a bit as well. And then they didn't do another check, so you don't know how long these blood markers last. This was a study done in '83 looking at the ultrastructure by EM, and they found that abnormal conditions peaked around 1 to 3 days after the marathon, which makes sense because that's when you're the most sore. And these abnormalities persist for about 7 days. They see a lot of muscle fiber necrosis and inflammation. Similar pictures shown in this pathology journal, and they looked at creatinine kinase activity, and they looked at the calf muscle, the gastrocnemius, by electron microscopy. And it's a little weird because usually in distance runners you would think the soleus is the more important muscle. There's two muscles in your calf, the gastrocnemius and the soleus. And the soleus is more of the endurance muscle, and the gastrocnemius is more of the fast twitch muscle. But they tested the gastrocnemius in these marathon runners, and they found focal fiber injury and repair, and this lasted for 1 to 3 days, and then these were repaired within 3 to 4 weeks. And then veteran runners, so people who run a lot, they showed some fibrotic response to repetitive injury, so you could see some scar tissue within their muscles. This is a pretty interesting paper where they did a systematic review of running related injuries, and basically they found out that novice runners, people who are just starting to run, have a much higher rate of injury, so about 18 injuries per 1,000 hours of running versus 7.7 for recreational runners, and even lower, going down to the 3 per 1,000 runners in long distance track and field athletes. So it is one of the more injurious sports, but then what they consider to be injury was not entirely clear from this study. But most runners will have some kind of injury, a muscle tear or stress stress injury of their joints or ligaments. This was an interesting paper out of Korea showing that they did notice quite a bit of DNA damage. DNA damage immediately after the run, and it increased as distance increased. So 10 kilometer and 20 and half marathon groups showed increases, but to a lesser extent. And they suspect that it's been because of all the oxygen use during the marathon causes oxidative damage by reactive oxygen species. Most of this recovered within about 2 days after the marathon. So the DNA damage was reversed pretty soon after the marathon. So he says, show that all three groups recovered from significantly high levels of damage to resting levels about 3 days after the marathon race. And then this one they talk about another paper that reported high levels of DNA damage caused by a 50-kilometer ultra marathon race returned to levels about 2 hours after the race. So it depends on kind of the intensity. Usually these ultra marathons are not as intense, mainly because they're longer. And this was actually the most interesting paper here, exercise-induced muscle damage and running economy in humans. Basically, the couple of things that I learned from this paper are eccentric uh, muscle work. That means where you load a muscle, but the muscle actually lengthens. That happens in running a lot because you're impacting your muscles are absorbing the impact of the run. It would be kind of like jumping off of something and landing. When you do that, you're not contracting the muscle. The muscle's like lengthening as you absorb the impact. So that happens over and over again in running. That's running has a lot of eccentric muscle work that causes more muscle damage and more soreness, as opposed to something like cycling, which has very little eccentric work but more concentric work. Then they also noted that doing downhill running, therefore, is the most damaging to muscles, causes the most amount of soreness, and then that doing a single bout of these exercises blunts further muscle damage. So basically, if you're trained, you get less muscle damage on the second round because you've gone through that. And let's see, the last part of this was, yeah, they found some supplements which were helpful. They thought flavonoid preparations were helpful after the injury. So flavonoids are found in like beets and other very dark vegetables like kale and things like that. So might be a good idea to load up on a lot of dark vegetables after the marathon. I wish I would have known that sooner. I would have loaded up on it. I'm pretty much recovered from it now, and most recommendations are to take it easy for about a week after the marathon. So I went for my first run about 6 days after the marathon, which might be a little early, and the run definitely felt a little harder than it should. Um, Usually I run about 11 miles every Saturday, and that 11 miles felt harder than the previous 11 miles, probably because my muscles are still recovering from the marathon. And they said to take it easy for about 3 weeks afterwards. So probably going to lower the training volume before I ramp up again. All right, well, I hope if any of you guys are runners, maybe this was interesting. I will link these papers below. Mainly, I did this for my own benefit, and but if you're interested, I will link these papers in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone.